Joined in the studio by Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. Elliot, well, he was dynamite, but unfortunately, we're in a situation now because of him.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely fair. There's no doubt that the Tories deserve a large share of the blame for why, for example, we have what was going to be an 80-year high tax burden is now going to be a record high tax burden under the changes on Wednesday. But there's also no doubt that no budget that the Tories delivered, was as spectacularly disastrous, with the exception of perhaps the Liz Truss mini budget, is the one on Wednesday. And in a nice surprise for Sunak, he got his poll lead back on Friday, I think for the first time that he's ever had a poll lead over Starmer. And that was polling taken in the immediate aftermath of the budget.
So what are the main things in that budget? Let's, where do we start with this disaster?
Fundamentally, it's a great time to be a public sector worker, brilliant time to be a civil servant, brilliant time to work in local government, to be an NHS middle manager. But terrible time if you're a pensioner. You're now facing having to pay inheritance tax on some of your pension, on any pension that you pass on to your children, grandchildren, whoever it is. It's a terrible time to be an investor with capital gains tax going up. It's a terrible time to be an employer, and particularly an employer looking to hire new people, maybe give your staff pay rises, bonuses, whatever it is, because of the hike in national insurance on employer contributions. And really, it's a terrible time to be a taxpayer anywhere in the United Kingdom.
So basically, it's a terrible time to be looking for any growth in the economy, because all those things, so investors and employers, they are the arbiters of growth ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the Labour Party have shown on Wednesday that they have decisively abandoned their plan for growth. That was a nice talking point for them over the election campaign and in the first few months of government. But what they've decided instead is a very different path, which is just to plug every hole in the public sector they can, throw billions and billions of pounds in the hope that you might see small, minor improvements over the next few years, and hope that that will get them across the line in a few years' time.
What about the inheritance tax for farmers, which seems, I think they were trying to stop rich people from using the loophole in the law to acquire assets and hide money. But the only people it's affected really seriously are the farmers. Yeah,
and the reason why people so desperately try to use any loopholes they can is because of how nasty this tax is. You work hard all your life building up your wealth that you will have paid tax on all your life, and then half of it can just suddenly be taken by the taxman. So there's a reason why people want to use loopholes, but then there's also a reason why those loopholes exist, which is that many of these farms simply actually are worth quite a bit, not wealth you ever realise, because you never sell it. You aim to pass it down to the next generations, but now farmers are going to be hit by it. So that's just another group that is going to be hit really badly by this, I have to say, quite nasty budget.
It does seem a bit ridiculous, like 1 million, and then you start paying inheritance tax.
Yeah.
If you're a landowner and a farmer who's got assets, apparently one of those JCB...
Think how much a tractor costs.
It's about £250,000.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And farming is not an industry with huge amounts of profit. It's an industry that actually a lot of people in because they really love it, they're really passionate about it. They think it makes a major contribution to our societal fabric. They're often, I think, actually quite selfless people in many cases. And yet this Labour Party has decided to try and destroy their way of life in many cases.
What about bringing up the minimum wage? Because surely that's a good thing, isn't it? But again, it's the employers who grow the economy who will suffer with that. Yeah,
so listen, I can understand why some people would be very supportive of an increase in the minimum wage. We obviously want people to be paid better, but the simple reality is a minimum wage worker hired now under these changes, working full-time, is going to cost an extra £2,500 for an employer with the increase of national minimum wage and employers' national insurance. For many employers, that's just not affordable. They just cannot afford it. So they either won't hire that member of staff, maybe they'll look to automate that role. And, if you're going to increase the minimum wage, that should be the absolute last time you do something like hike national insurance on employers.
Do you think this smacks of a lack of understanding of the repercussions of policies when you're making up stuff and not really understanding what the implications will be?
Absolutely. This is a cabinet absolutely stocked full of public sector workers, trade union officials, charity workers, people that can always ultimately go to the taxpayer and ask for more money, never really have to think about profits, never get to the end of the year and actually have to look at a balance sheet. And, you have the stress of, will I be able to pay my bills? Will I be able to pay my taxes? Will I be able to pay my staff? And we do not have people like that in the cabinet, and it's really, really showing this.
I don't understand how they've got away with splitting the national insurance. So if you're a public sector worker, then your employer doesn't have to pay it. But if you're a private sector worker, that is absolute two-tier, and it's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, it's this Labour Party, unfortunately, in this government, problem that the previous government had as well, but not to the same extent, of just, ultimately viewing the private sector as not much more than just a cash cow to pay for an increasingly unproductive and inefficient public sector.
So if you were Rachel Reeves right now, what would you reverse? What would you change?
Well, I'd reverse most of it, to tell you the truth. But I mean, the national insurance rises on employer contributions is the main thing. But listen, the key task for her now is, now that she's given the public sector all this money, she needs to start demanding some serious improvements.
She needs to deliver. And very quickly, finally, how do we look to the rest of the world and investors? Do we look like an inviting option for investment?
Well, listen, I mean, we look increasingly like a bad bet, I'm afraid. That's the simple reality.
A bad bet. Elliot Keck, thank you very much from the Taxpayers Alliance.